Last week on the Al Nicoletti Show. David Pupo, let's go, baby.
I think it's very critical to be able to understand what you're looking for in a partner. Where are you both going? Where is this boat going to? It's very critical to understand for any partnership. There's two phases to any small business. There's lead generation and there's conversion of those leads. I would ask them, where are you at? Where are you trying to go? And how can I help you get there? Those are like some of my bigger three questions I like to be able to ask people.
No, that makes sense.
The mindset around marketing as an expense or an investment. Are you looking at that as an expense? Or are you looking at it as that this is gonna make me more money? Everybody at one point that starts their own business has this issue. It's that you wanna put on your superhero cape and jump into the rescue and help these people out. But then you're conditioning that you're always helping. Then they're taking away your time from what your superpower should be. And that's generating more sales.
Right, getting more leads and getting more business rather than dealing with all the back end stuff.
You have to believe yourself. If you do not believe yourself, you're gonna be just drowning in doubt.
If you're able to actually step away from the office, you know you've built your systems out right.
You have to remember there's a higher purpose into what you are doing than just simply these day-to-day things.
You can't get yourself together until you get your schedule together.
But if you don't keep that larger mindset of what you're really trying to get to, you can give up pretty quickly on it. You don't know how strong you are until you have to be that strong. Being very high in your belief of what you can achieve, and you will be able to do it.
Powerful stuff right there, David.
Thank you so much for being able to invite me on here, Al.
And I'll see you soon.
See you, bud.
Love seeing the recaps every week. It just reminds me of what happened last week and everything that we talked about. David had an amazing episode, and I'm so glad I saw that because David talked a lot about partnerships and what it's like, the good, the bad, the ugly, when getting into partnerships in real estate and in business for that matter. And the other thing that I saw, I was talking about with, if you're able to actually step away from your business, you know you set your systems up right. And that is really important, especially if you want to scale your business. So if you missed any of that episode with David Pupo last week, you definitely want to go check that out. And special thanks to all the viewers that are watching and listening to the show on iTunes, Spotify, and Google Play. I know some big fans out there. Frank Hopkins Jr., I know you're watching and I know you're listening. So thank you guys for always watching and listening. You can find all the amazing content on YouTube under Al Nicoletti, Facebook page under Al Nicoletti, and you can see all the micro that's constantly dropping on Instagram at Attorney Nicoletti. Of course, with all the probate, partitions, quiet titles, and all the crazy weird stuff that I get into in the real estate world. You don't want to miss tonight's episode. We are going to be talking about creative strategies, whether it's creative financing, creative stuff, period, on getting into deals. This market that we're in, right? Who knows where it's going? What's happening with the interest rates? What's happening with deals? What's happening with some markets that are cooling off, some that are still sizzling and that are hot? We have to talk about creative ways to jump into real estate and jump into these deals because this is how you scale your business. This is how you get things done. So you want to stick around. Mark Monroe is going to bring the heat tonight like we have all our guests do on the show. It's going to be amazing. So get your pens out, get your paper out. I'm always taking notes. I know you all are always taking notes. And of course, ask questions. We want the group to participate. We love the participation on the Al Nicoletti Show. I see you, Christine. I love that you're here. Ashley, what's up? This is what it's all about. We got people in the house already watching. So it's 9:00. Let's go. Let's rock this thing. Hey, everybody. My name is Al Nicoletti. I'm an attorney here in Florida, and welcome to the Al Nicoletti Show, where I bring on real estate super investors, rising rock stars, movers and shakers, and leaders of clubs in their community that educate, entertain, and inspire all things on Florida real estate, and always talking about the niche other items that are out there in the real estate world. Whether they're focused in real estate, they're real estate adjacent, we're talking about Airbnb, branding, commercial property, land, creative financing, creative terms, whatever it is on how you can take your company to the next level. On my show today, I got the creative investor, super investor out of South Florida, Mark Monroe. This guy, every time I hear him, every time I see him at the live events, online, on his show, on his podcast, he's always dropping nuggets. When it comes to sub-2, when it comes to seller terms, when it comes to creative financing, whatever it is in the creative deal-making world, Mark really dives deep on it and does a lot of these kinds of deals and big deals too. So We are so excited Mark can be on the show live, and we are going to welcome him on the show. So without further ado, let's welcome him to the show, Mark Monroe. Mark, what's up, baby?
Al, man, 9 o'clock at night with the energy. I feel like I'm at 7, 8 o'clock in the morning getting ready for my workout. I love it how you bring the energy tonight. Wow. You're just feeding me right now. I love it. Congratulations, man. Thank you for so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm going to keep feeding you. It's crazy. I probably could do this at 3 a.m. I've joked about it before with Mike. I'm like, just wait. If I ever do this at 3, I don't think anybody's going to be watching, but I got that kind of energy. So I'm happy you're here, brother. I love that we're on. We get to do this live. Mark, I got 2 things to start you off with. One, what was the biggest lesson for you when jumping into real estate that you learned? What was the biggest aha moment when you got into real estate throughout your whole journey?
I would say, well, first of all, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. We've been talking about this for a while. We keep running into each other at all these events. So, I mean, Al, thank you so much. The information that you bring to the community and the energy and everything, you're really bringing a lot of value to everybody. So even for myself. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
But back to your question, I would say really compared to most businesses, because I've been an entrepreneur through many businesses throughout the years, that your competitor is actually your partner and you guys can make money together in real estate. So I would say that was probably my aha moment. That was one thing. And then understanding the other aha moment is once you start understanding the creative is how you can solve a seller's problem and help a buyer out and make a little bit of profit along the way. So those are the aha moments is really that aspect of it. But mainly the biggest thing is like people that you're like, oh my God, they're my competitor. I don't want to touch them. But your competitor is actually your ally and you guys end up doing business together.
That's a great point that you brought up. A lot of people, when they jump into the same world, the same niche, they immediately start thinking, well, we got to all fend for ourselves. And we, there's all these deals. It's all for me. I got to go work, get this, get that. But really a lot of the times, one person's going to be good at one thing. Another person's going to have a skill set for another thing. Kind of like what David and I were talking about when you get into a partnership, you're going to have the right partnership are people that are doing totally different things, have different attributes, but can work together on a common goal. And like you're saying, Mark, in this kind of economy, in this kind of market, you got to work together, and that's what makes it really work. Stop the competitive part, work together, partner together, collaborate. Maybe it's not a long-term partnership, but maybe it's a JV, right?
Exactly. Yep. 100%. It is. It just becomes the way I describe it now to a lot of people is like kind of like think of the all-star team of whoever takes your professional team. It's a team effort. It's not just one person. You ever look at when you're out there watching football or basketball, when you have that one guy trying to hog everything and they're trying to be greedy, take it down, they end up failing. But when it's a team effort, when everybody comes together, they succeed. And that's the beauty about real estate is the same thing. We're all here to help each other out. And if you come across with somebody that's not willing to help you out, that's kind of a red flag because the majority of real estate investors in the community are here to help each other out because we know if you're helping somebody out, you're going to pay it forward. We all end up winning together.
I love it. That's a great prelude into what we're going to get in tonight, especially with all the creative financing, seller terms, all that stuff. And here's part 2. So I thought about this one today because when I opened up season 4, one of my themes in the little twist in this year is not just always talking about how do you make, $100,000 on one deal in 60 days, or how do you get into this or that, but also talking about the things that a lot of us don't talk about when we're in our real estate world. It's like, what are we doing on the off time? And last week, you and I were talking, we're going back and forth about what we're going to get into on the show. And you're like, yeah, man, I'm in Palm Springs, California. I'm relaxing. I'm watching the tennis matches. I'm enjoying myself. And a lot of times we don't take the time to say, wait a second, we either need a break or we need to have our downtime. We need to have our hobbies. We need to go, step aside out of the office for a little bit. take us through that mindset too. Like what is that like, stepping outside of that world and having that downtime, that off time, and exploring?
I made that world. I created that world. I know I've grinded for many years, and you get to a point where you get exhausted. I've had thousands of employees through different businesses throughout the years. I've had a mortgage company in Washington, D.C. with 107 loan officers. I had a loan mod company 10, 12 years ago with 81 employees. It's always a grind. So now in the real estate investing world and kind of what we're doing in creative financing, I create that world. I want to be able to work remotely and enjoy my life. Like during the summer, I was in Cape Town. I was down there for a whole month. The year before, I was out in Italy for a month, and then I was in Portugal. So I created that world where I can work remotely. That's the beauty about real estate with today's technology. There's so many people in other countries, Israel, Japan. These people are in other countries, Canada. They're working virtually in our country because the data is so easy to get nowadays. And then you get boots on the ground and you get experts. And so I can't tell you how many properties I've purchased through the years that I've never stepped foot in. And because of that, that's the world that I want to live in now, where I can travel the world and enjoy it and work remotely. Everything so far has been good, except I was one time 2 years ago after COVID, I was out in Lake Como, and the only difference is the time. It's 6 hours difference. So it was my other half and I were at a beautiful dinner in Lake Como, and it was a good sunset, and it was 7:30 at night, 1:30 back home, and we had a deal closing, and the title company was screwing the whole entire HUD up.
Wow.
So that's the only time that things really kind of got in the way. Otherwise than that, she's pretty cool. But I enjoy, and I created my environment in my workspace and my systems all around where I can work remotely and have great virtual assistants. People, some of these virtual assistants that we have in the Philippines are better than some of the employees back at home. Here nowadays they're entitled, if you will. So, but I don't want to go there, but yeah, so I really enjoy myself, and what I can put into it is what I get out of it. Yes, if you're young and you're hungry, go for it. But then you get to our age where we kind of want to enjoy it a little bit more.
Yeah, a lot like my business. I'm virtual, so if I went somewhere for a week, nobody would even know. I mean, who knows? Like, I think it's just so great that when you can build your virtual business that way, and you can be anywhere you want to be and still run your systems and still have your VAs and still have your assistants do things. It's great. I just think that every time I've spoken to you, you're always somewhere. It's amazing, right? I think that inspires people out there that, wait a second, we can live this more entrepreneurial lifestyle. We don't have to be glued to the desk and have to be somewhere. We can go somewhere and do it. So I think that's great. Keep going.
Well, look at you. Every time I turn around, you're in a different part of the world, part of the country. I can't even. I get exhausted when I watch you. You're always, but I do the same thing. But you're always out there working. You're at all these different events, but at the same time, we're all working, no matter where we're at with today's environment. Look at this phone. There's more technology. When they sent Apollo to the moon back in the day, what did they say? Like the Atari from the 80s had more technology than they sent the first thing up in outer space. So, that's the beauty of this, is we can work from anywhere,
Yeah.
and it's just, you got to understand it and take it and enjoy it and absorb it and appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. I think you got to keep going with it, and I hope people that are watching take that and they start thinking about how they're going to run their businesses in that way, or just be able to take more time off. I think that's so important. I'm more of a believer in that, and having more time to explore your mind. Like, I'm not speaking anywhere right now. The last couple of weeks, Mark, it's kind of been quiet, which is nice. And that's a good time too, to kind of reflect and recharge and regroup and get through your systems and stuff.
But it is about having your systems in place. If you have really good systems and good people, it will take so much off your plate. That it really comes down to that. I can't tell you how many times that I've talked to other newbie investors, and they go out there and they will go ahead and pitch a seller a situation and a deal, and they never follow up. Where 70% of the deals come from your follow-ups, because they don't have a good system in place and they're always chasing it, so you have to have, that's just one example, but you have to have great systems, which I'm sure you have an amazing systems in place just by, working with you recently, going through this whole process.
Yeah, that takes time, right? That takes a lot of trial and error. I think that saying has come up a lot for me in the last couple of weeks about trying this and trying that and maybe tweaking it a certain way, because you're not going to perfect it the first time, right? You're not going to perfect that system the first time. You just got to see how it works with all the assistants and your schedule. It comes down to your schedule, comes down to, how do you want to time block your stuff and figure it out that way. But, it's great. I mean, Christine, she dropped the palm tree, and Teresa says, that sounds amazing. Can't wait to say I created that world. See, I mean, it's inspiring for people, Mark. I love it.
Yeah. Christine, I mean, that girl, she's got energy.
Oh my gosh, Christine's amazing. I mean, we're at the SoFlo Summit. I immediately see her. Of course, like the two energy worlds just like come together, immediately making videos.
She's the ball for her. I enjoy talking to her. She's got so much energy, and she's always like, she's so passionate, so I really enjoy that about her.
I love it. I love the whole group that watches the show. It's amazing. And I love the kind of stuff that we get into all the time. Mark, let's talk about seller terms. Let's start there with creative financing. I think it's a hot topic. It's a popular subject. One of the things a lot of people want to explore, but don't know how, don't know what to look for, don't know how to educate maybe the seller on you're going to get more money over the long term doing this. Walk us through Mark Monroe's world of seller terms and seller financing.
So I look at two things when I'm talking to a seller. I'm listening to the seller and trying to dig into what their issue is, why they're selling, and how I can solve their problem creatively. That's the first thing. And then at the same time is, who's my buyer? So those are two things, because you can easily get a deal and lock up under seller financing terms and solve the problem. But if you don't have a buyer, you're going to be running in circles. So I always look at like whatever the median price range for that area, like 20% above and 20% below. That's the number one thing I look at, because I can't tell you, like in today's world, some of these higher end homes, like say the median price range is like 350,000. I'm getting stuff coming across my desk, 900,000 to $1 million, right? You can get that deal locked up, but who's your buyer? You're going to be spending time and energy to try to structure that buyer. So those are the two things, but really it comes down to is listening to the seller, finding out what they're trying to accomplish, and how we can solve it through a creative financing way where it works for everybody. I can go through, I have so many examples, but
yeah, go for it.
Yeah, we talked about a couple. I mean, let me give you one really quick one. I had one that came in from one of my JVs. I call JVs. Like I have over 600 bird dogs out there that bring me deals.
Wow. That's a lot.
Yeah. My best ones come from hospice nurses.
We should talk about that. But I'm going to make a note of that. We'll talk about bird dog. Yeah.
Yeah. Especially in your world too with it. But anyways, so we had one that came in. The property was worth, the ARV on that one is probably about 128, let's say 130. The seller wanted 30%. He was open to seller financing. He had no loan, but he wanted $30,000 down. I'm like, it doesn't make sense putting that much capital down on one asset. And I said to him, so it doesn't make sense. Well, first of all, I'm like, what are you planning on doing with that capital? He goes, I want to buy a camper. I want to retire and kind of drive around the country. And I'm like, how much is that camper? And he goes, oh, it's going to be about $28,000. He was going to pull it. So I go, it's just from an investor's point of view, it doesn't make sense. For that $30,000, I can redeploy that into about like 3 or 4 or 5 assets instead of tying up in one assets. However, the money works cash flow because, there's enough capital there. I said, why don't you go out and get your financing for the camper? We'll give you $3,500 down. And on the 20th of every month, we'll go ahead and make the payment to the finance company for your camper. So he's like, oh, okay. So he jumped for it. So we got into that deal for $3,500 instead of $30,000. And there's cash flow there where there's enough for us to make money and for him to get capital for his camper. And he still makes a little bit of capital. That's just one example. but there's so many other examples. But that's just one creative financing, is listening to the seller, finding out what is accomplishing, because most investors don't listen what they're trying to accomplish. And that's just one example. I could go on and on, but that was just a recent one that we just came across with, that we just locked up within the last few days of listening to a seller, that what he was trying to accomplish. And he was all for it. So it worked out really well. So we're purchasing that through a seller financing. He's going to get his cash flow. And then we're selling it to somebody through what's called, I like to do rent to own buyers. So what I like about those guys is because they're an amazing tenant, because they want to become homeowners. And they are so much easier because they take care of and they take pride. So I look for properties in a nice area, school district, where they want to raise their children to grow, because they don't want to move their family around. They want to stay there. So you give them an opportunity to become homeowners. So it usually takes, depending on the credit situation, 18 to 24 to 30 months to get the credit in line. And if you structure it a certain way, some banks will even treat that as a refinance. So it's a win, because you help the seller out. And what I really like is you helping the buyer out, becoming a homeowner, and then you as the investor in the middle, you make some cash flow in the middle, and everybody wins.
You know what that's kind of like to me, that I'm thinking about in my head? It's kind of like with Airbnbs, right? Like when I first heard Airbnb, I'm only thinking it's got to be in a beach town. It's got to be somewhere just vacation period. But then when we had Jason Matthews on the show, we had some other people on the show talk about Airbnb, Glenn Friedman. It became like strategically picking up Airbnbs in certain areas based upon maybe somebody was moving there for work, or maybe it was in a certain area that was popular, who knows, for events. And I get the same feel with the seller terms that you're talking about, where it comes to, this is a great strategy because the family, they want to raise their family here. Like that's why it makes sense for this strategy. Or maybe because they're going to have the whole family move down. And I'm getting that sense now. So are there certain types of markets, like top 5 kinds of things that you're thinking of, that you're like, this is going to be a seller term or creative financing deal?
I always go, like, even during the boom in the last 10 years, I've always done seller financing. Every wholesaler out there, they're focusing on, the hot market. So what I do, really, it doesn't really matter which market it is really listening to the seller's objective of what they're trying to accomplish. That's really what it comes down to, is just listening to them, what they're trying to do. Do they need the capital to go purchase another home? Especially in these markets, like I want the market to pull back, because that's where these type of strategies come in. But even when the market's been hot, I can still kind of do these. But to answer your question, it really doesn't matter which kind of market, if it's hot or cold. Sure, the hot market is a little bit more challenging for seller financing, because they can get 5, 10 offers, 30 offers on one home. But then there's sellers out there that can't sell. And then when a market is slow like this, I look for, like, when I train like my people, or even have my VAs, what they tend to do is they go on to Zillow, and they go on to other, like, for sale by owner websites, and they look for properties that have been sitting 45, 60, 90 days. And then we reach out to them. And this is the one question they go through and ask about the property. But the one question will always tell you if they're open to some type of terms: would you be willing to rent your property for a few years to us, and then we close on it? We'll take care of the maintenance and repairs up to like $3,500. Anything more than that, most likely the homeowner's insurance. If they say yes, they're going to be open to some type of seller financing terms. That one question.
Great golden nugget question right there. We'll make sure that's micro content, because if people could ask that one question, and that just changes the game for them with seller financing and creative financing, boom, right? That solves a lot of the problems and helps provide solutions to the seller. But I love your point about active listening. I saw a reel not too long ago, maybe the other day, of Eric Klein. They were kind of going over a call they had with the seller, and the acquisition guy wasn't really paying attention to what the seller was saying. He was like, man, just listen. Just listen to what the seller's saying, and they'll tell you everything you need to know. And they'll take you down the road. So I love that advice right there. Christine was saying, I don't know, maybe this was kind of where we were all going. What top 3 markets seller financing are your best opportunities?
I actually like markets that drop the most, except California, because California, New York, um, you can still do them. Absolutely, I'll do them, but I'm very cautious because us investors were considered the big bad wolf in some of those states, if that makes sense. Like I buy a lot, but like if I'm selling on a lease option, gotta be very, very cautious on doing a lease option in some of these other states, because then this becomes more of the landlord tenant. If they're not landlord friendly states, Florida is great. There's a lot of good states about it. If I'm doing a state where it's not landlord friendly, then I'm going to sell it through what's called an agreement for deed. So you still got to go through a little bit of foreclosure process, but you're not considered a landlord tenant. Landlord tenant laws in some of these states are very challenging, so be very cautious. And whoever's listening to this, down the road in the future, some of the regulations can change. So just make sure you're kind of informing yourself on your state regulations. So, depending on your exit strategy. But it doesn't really matter what market it is. It matters what market you're doing, depends on what type of exit strategy you're doing. So you're protected as an investor. When I look at things, I'm always looking at risk. That's the number one thing I'm looking at. What's my risk in this particular file or deal, or whatever I want to call it?
I'm seeing the analysis. So active listening. Do I have the end buyer and the risk involved?
Yes. And I do want to get into how to present a seller financing at some point. That's the key.
Let's do that. Christine said Texas. Is that Texas good?
Texas is good, but it's challenging to do lease options in Texas. I would do an assignment in Texas. You can't do a sandwich lease option in Texas. So a sandwich lease option, and actually I posted a video. I did a sandwich lease option just recently, about a month and a half ago, that I just closed on. I locked this sandwich lease option up for $100, and I made $50,500 on it.
Crazy.
On that one. So what it is, and it was done by a realtor, and I gave them 100% value for the property. And this was like about 2 years ago. So I locked it up for $100, and it's called a rent to own. If you guys don't know what a lease option is. So it allows me to rent to own, and it allows me to sublet it. And then I went and found my end buyer, and those are great for Airbnbs if you can do that. So you can go under a contract with a seller and be straightforward. I'm up forward straight with all my sellers. I tell them exactly what I'm doing. And then I said, hey, my agreement's between you and me. So if anything happens with the property, you don't have to worry about it. You're just still getting paid. And I'm taking care of the maintenance and repairs up to a certain dollar amount. Anything more than that, most likely homeowner's insurance would kick in. So in this particular one, I locked it up for, God, I don't remember. It's like 179. That's what it was, 179. And I sold it for 214. And I also structured it where I got $150 monthly rent credit. So I got a discount on that. And I cash flowed my rent to my seller was, what was it, $1,200, I think, on that one. And I was $1,300, yeah, $1,200, and my rent was $1,550, so I was cash flowing. So when you add it all up together, it came to $50,500. So when I went and found my end buyer, I got first month, last month in security, and 3% down. So it was a little bit more than about $11,000, and I only had to give her my seller 2 months, first month in security. I called it an option fee. It was $2,400, and I got $11,000, so I had to give her $2,400. So I cash flowed about $8,600, I think.
Wow.
So that was just one example of a creative deal.
I mean, you're talking like solid numbers, solid cash flow, something that's going to just keep lasting. And then that's just one deal.
Yeah.
I mean, you could find another deal like that and just keep adding to the portfolio. And it just sounds like you're like away from the traditional transaction, buy and sell. We're getting into more of that creative route, and it seems to just work that way. It seems to work that way for you, works that way for Christine. It works that way for a lot of investors that get into it. That's huge. So you were talking about how to present a seller financing deal.
Correct.
What does that look like? What's the Mark Monroe package?
So we had one that came from one of my JVs, my joint ventures. So a seller and exactly just came in about 2 weeks ago. Actually, it was 2 weeks ago. So it came in. The sellers, it's been on the market for 90 days. They can't sell it. They moved. They got a job and they had to transfer. So they moved. I want to say this was in Georgia or South Carolina, one of those states. Actually, South Carolina. So they moved for a job, and they really want to sell it, but they're open to doing like the way we were going to present it. It was like seller financing terms. On They want it minimum as possible, like 3 or 5 years. So what I did is I do this in all my seller financing deals. I go ahead and work up an amortization schedule. I use an app on my phone called I2B, and I can send it out to everybody afterwards. It's like $6. It's a calculator that does the financial. I go ahead and calculate it, and I sent it to the seller. And I got on the phone with the seller. I said, do me a favor. You got the amortization schedule I pulled up, right? I said, yes. I said, do me a favor. Let's go through a scenario. Let's go down, open that document up. You see the purchase price, the finance that we're putting down, the purchase price. We're doing an interest rate, like I think at 5.5%. I said, go down to like line 120, 120 payments. That's at 10 years. Let's go down to 100. How much money? And I said, how much? I go, write this down. How much money did you collect over 10 years? And they wrote it down. I said, over to the right, what's the balance of that balloon payoff? They said, okay, so add those numbers together. They added the numbers together. And I said, how much are you selling this property for? Boom. And I said, if you're paying a realtor and you're going to, like, if I'm coming in retail, what do you, they're going to beat you up on the price, blah, blah, blah. I said, those numbers that you add together compared to subtract what you're asking for, what's that total dollar amount? It was $129,000. I said, you're going to make an extra $129,000 on this scenario. You become the bank, and it's secured against an asset. So the way you present it like that, and you give it to them in numbers and let them see it, versus if you say it, they're going to put a wall up and they're not going to listen. But if you give it to them in a document and they see it and present it that way, and they see the numbers, it changes the whole game, and it really sinks in. So they originally only want to do 3 or 5 years. Because they saw that, they end up going with a 10-year balloon on that particular one, because you present it in a way, because the market is so unstable, you're diversifying. And if it's a second home, it's considered ordinary income versus capital gains, which you probably know, Al, about that stuff. You can talk a little bit about that, because it's like, they're going to get hit with capital gains if they sell it outright. But if you're doing seller financing, then it's considered ordinary income, and it's done over, each year paying taxes instead of all in one shot.
I leave that to the CPAs to figure out. I don't get into any of that, but but it's fascinating. I think sounds like common sense, right? To say, hey, let me just show you the numbers, right? But some people don't do that. They just want to like get the seller under contract and explain that, hey, we're going to offer this, and don't worry, you're going to be making more on this. But actually showing them the table. I mean, when you were explaining that, I'm visualizing what this Excel spreadsheet looks like and taking them down to that number. Because a lot of people maybe wouldn't even think about that, right? A lot of times people aren't thinking about showing them what this looks like. I could think of a handful of cases, probate cases, where it wasn't just the primary house that's being sold. We're talking about assets, right? We're talking about like things that are in an IRA, things that are, and when you actually break down the numbers and wait a second, you're getting 3% of what? And then you actually show them, it makes a world of difference. I love that. Huge value.
So somebody had a question there about, do sellers get uncomfortable about they do if they don't understand seller financing. So, and it is correct. I can't tell you how many times I work with new investors that they say the seller, they don't want anything to do with seller financing. But if you break it down and really make it simple and show them an amortization schedule that comes from an app, not from you, if you explain it to the phone, they're going to put a wall up. They're going to be like, I don't know what you're talking. Even when you say I want to do a rent to own, or I'm sorry, when you say you're doing a lease option, they're like, what's the lease option? But if you explain it and kind of simplify it, like a rent to own, most people get it. But yes, on the seller financing, most people are like, no, 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 I don't want to do it because they don't understand it. But if you take your time and educate them and give them the amortization schedule and send it to an email and let them look at it. But when they look at an amortization schedule at first, they're going to be like, because it's like, whoa, what am I looking at? All these numbers. I don't know if anybody's ever looked at amortization schedule, but like it's all full of numbers all over the place. But if you take it and say, hey, you know what, let's open it up, go to the top, it shows the financing terms, and then go scroll down to like line 120, and it usually has a summary of how much they paid and then how much in total. There's actually another column that's what they paid in interest. That's really the dollar amount figure that they're collecting. But what I like to do is I like to add up the numbers of how much they've collected and what the balance is, because it's a much bigger number and they're going to see that in their head and like, wow, I'm selling this for 200,000, but I'm going to make 309,000. That's when you add those numbers up. So that's kind of why I do that. But if you go to an amortization schedule and you look at the interest over 10 years, you'll see exactly how much money they're making.
Yeah, and you and I both know 10 years, 20 years. I mean, that's a long time, but it's like it's the wow factor, right? It's like, look at this. This is your potential. And people just see the numbers.
Well, think about it. And anybody that's have a mortgage, the first 10 years is always going towards mainly interest. So that's why it's perfect. And I always tell the seller, I mean, quite frankly, after 5-7 years, you want me to default. Look how much money you collected. And you get the property back, as most likely it's got a value, but I never had that happen to me. But they come out way ahead if that's the worst case scenario.
Have you ever had a seller say, gee, Mark, I'm actually so glad you showed up today because I was about to sign a contract with somebody for way less. And like, this is amazing. Like, have you had that multiple testimonial experience?
Yeah, so many times. So many times. But it comes down to listening to the seller, what they're trying to accomplish. Do they need that capital? You can show them how much more money they can make. I actually like, believe it or not, I like working with investors that already investors that understand it in their numbers, because they understand it and they get it. When there's somebody that doesn't understand the numbers, they're a little bit more challenging to work with. But I look for properties, and if you're looking for seller financing, look for landlords that have been landlords for 10, 15, 20 years. I purchased a 13 units, 0 down, and we closed on August 30th. And with 0 down, we actually at closing, we got money back from the closing from the seller because of last month in security, which, that's for that. And then 2 days later, we collected a little bit more than $10,000 of rent checks because it was a seller. It came from another hospice nurse. What happened was the father was a landlord and he owned I don't know how many properties he had. He died like 10 years ago. The daughter that was 28 years old took over and she started managing it, and she got in a motorcycle accident. And then the mother, it was just too much for the mother to take care of, and these are property, but she liked that passive income. So we reached out, how much money do you need to live off monthly? And we found out what it was, and we backed the numbers in and structured it. And she needed $2,200 a month plus the Social Security. She's comfortable. And we ended up structuring it. Now, we're cash flowing $4,800 a month on that property. And we bought it with 0 down.
Crazy. I mean, those are crazy numbers. And you said something that just like went off in my mind. I'm thinking, if people want to find probate properties or fixer-upper properties, they're going to go to more of the distressed leads, right? The ones that are back on taxes, back on mortgage payments. But what you mentioned was, if you maybe want to pick up some of these deals for creative financing, maybe landlords are a lead source.
100%.
So let's talk about that for a second, because I don't know, if everybody's buzzing about, I want to pick up leads, I want to pick up more of these leads, drop a comment, drop a fire. See my man, Robert Rodriguez out there. I love that you're watching, man. Drop gems. How do you find these creative deals out there? What are the lead source lists?
Property managers are huge. I mean, so many. I have about, like I said, about over 600 bird dogs now. Hospice nurses are great because I'll give you an example. My last one, it was an elderly couple. He was ill, and she was too elderly to take care of him. So they had to move in with the daughter, and the daughter was over 3 hours away. They called me up and say, "Hey, we got this property for sale." And so I listened what they were trying to accomplish. So what they were trying to do is it was just the property became a headache for them. Not a headache, but they're more worried about the situation that they're in. Um, and the mother said, "Okay, I just, I'm probably going to end up living about another 7 years, 5, 7 years. So I just want that monthly cash flow. And then at the end, I want the capital to go to my children." So we did a seller financing on that one, and she's getting payments, monthly payments for 7 years. But the kicker is like they called me and they were worried about they couldn't get the property ready to put on the MLS. They've owned it for years, and it had so much. Think about it, like people that own the property 30, 40 years, how much stuff is in that property?
Oh my gosh.
So I'm like, take what you want, what you don't want, just leave. I mean, they left so much, even the cable box was still left behind. I'm like, don't worry about it. We'll take care of it. So that was one of them. So hospice nurses, Uber drivers, realtors right now in today's environment when it's not, Amazon, any contractors, landscapers, snowplow removals, anybody out there that is in communities working on those properties. You can pull lists if you want to pull, if you're used to one of these guys that pull prop stream or batch leads, any of those data. You can pull non-owner occupied landlords for like 20, 30 years. I call them tired landlords. They like that passive income and they don't want to get hit with capital gains tax. So they're definitely open to some type of seller financing terms.
Yeah. When you first answered the question, I was expecting to hear like, it's this kind of list, it's this kind of list, this kind of list. But you're like going straight to that bird dog concept.
I do. That's
right?
my model.
I mean, I haven't actually heard anybody talk about a bird dog model. So like making connections with the people that are out in the community that kind of see the issue spot, right? They're issue spotting the red flags, the flag, and they're like, you get them to all come to Mark. That's a great idea, right? I mean, you're diversifying your portfolio of where you find these leads.
I'm all about networking. Even raising my capital is all networking. Like an example, how I raise capital is I look for conventions that are non-real estate related, but high net worth individuals. I'm in South Florida. Here's an example. There was a cardiac convention that was in Las Vegas. Cardiac. I couldn't get in because I'm not a physician, but I knew which hotel they were staying at. So what I did is I jumped on a plane and went out there and hung out at the lobby bar. Guess where most of the networking's done? You've been to these conventions.
Oh, yeah.
They're all done at the hotel lobby bar area. I ended up raising $450,000 that way through, I just started talking to them. Hey, what do you do? I do real estate. When they say the word, I love to get into real estate, but I don't have the time and energy. Ding, ding, ding. That's the flag. Like, okay, let me put your capital to work for you. Let's partner up.
Got it. I mean, that's amazing. I know a lot of people are loving this concept. Eugene said, how do you compensate these bird dogs?
So that's the key. If you're a licensed realtor, you got to be careful because you cannot, depending on your regulations, you have to do some research. That's why I never became a realtor, because I'm an investor. So it depends on it. If they're like just giving me, like driving by to see the house is completely empty, like a garbage man, and there's no one living there, it could be $500, or it could be somebody that knows that the seller needs to sell and they planted the seed. Think about it, Al. Like if you need some work done, or even somebody's like, well, I'll use you an example. If you need work done or something, and if I'm giving you a referral, most likely you're going to go with that person that's giving you a referral. So when you get referrals, you don't have to chase that seller so much, because you've already been put up on a pedestal. Whoever referred you, hey, reach out to Mark. He's done this, and this. Reach out to Al. He's the probate person. He knows this stuff. So you don't have to sell them. You're getting people coming. That's why you're doing this stuff that you're doing, is because you're getting so many referrals and you get so much business from this. It's kind of the exact same concept and the same model, if that makes sense what I'm saying.
So basically, I'm bird dogging.
You're networking. You're not bird dogging. You're networking. You know,
Of course, the networking's huge.
it's in this game. It's all about networking. You know,
Yeah.
these gurus go out there, and I don't want to talk bad about gurus, but they want you. They pull you in and then say, "Hey, do this, this, and this. Pull this list, pull that list." But they're getting kickbacks on that stuff, referrals or whatnot, because they're making more money about it. And that's kind of, and then what's happened is it's gone out there on YouTube and everywhere, and thousands and thousands of investors are doing the same thing and pulling lists. You want to think differently. What can you do different than what everybody else is doing? You got to think outside the box. That's where the creativeness comes in.
Yeah, no, it's huge. All of this is great. I don't want to forget about some of the other great questions that we have here. I think it's Srijana. She said, for lease option, do you normally buy turnkey properties or value add?
You want, if you're doing a lease option, you want a house that's you don't have to put a lot of money into. You don't want to put a lot of money into a property that needs work that you don't own. If you're gonna have to put money into a property that you gotta, there's one guy, I was talking to him. He goes, "Yeah, I bought this property in a lease option, and I ended up putting $30,000 into this property fixing it." I'm like, "You don't own this property. You don't want to put that money into it, and they didn't cloud the title, to protect their asset." If you're going to put that much capital into it, and I've done those, you want to do it through like what I call like an agreement for deed or land contract, so you have a little bit more skin in the game, and then cloud the title as well. If you're doing a lease option, yes, you want it to be kind of turnkey. We don't have to do much work to it. Nice neighborhoods. Yes, I agree with that one 100%. And I like to negotiate it where I get a little down on the property. I usually do 1 month and 2 months worth of rent to lock it up. To get into it. I'll lock it up for $100, $500, whatever it is for earnest money, and give myself a long due diligence period to go ahead and try to find myself an end buyer for a tenant buyer.
Huge strategies. I mean, I feel like you got to rewind that a couple of times and like watch that and go over these strategies. For you, Mark, it's an everyday thing, right? Like, and I think that's what's great about bringing guests like you on the show. You're doing this every single day, getting into that groove, getting into that niche, and it's your lingo, it's your language. Teresa, she said, are you making offers to properties that are listed with a realtor? If yes, are you also presenting the offer to the realtor?
You have to train the realtor. Like the amortization schedule, most realtors don't even know what they do know amortization schedules, but they don't know how to present it. You have to train the realtor on it. And say, if the realtor doesn't say, "Hey, do you mind if we kind of jump on a phone call and do a phone conference together with a realtor and us together?" And kind of go through that process. So great question, Teresa. And thank you, by the way, for ordering my book. She mentioned in that chat there that she ordered my book. So I appreciate it. Yes, I present it. And the thing about realtors, when you're presenting a lease option, so realtors are you got to keep in mind, when they're selling it, they're trying to get that 6% commission. If they're switching it to a rental, then the commission only drops down to usually 1 month's rent. So keep that in mind. So you want to, what I normally do in some cases with a realtor, if I'm working with a realtor, whatever I'm putting down, I'm making sure there's enough there for my realtor to get paid for their commission. And then the seller's probably not get anything. But I've done some transactions. I have one realtor where he's super cool. He's getting his commission paid monthly. The way we structured, he gets monthly checks. He's got 18 deals like that where instead of getting all that commission up front, he's getting monthly checks on 18 different deals that we end up structuring through his commission through like a note strategy.
Look at that. Look at another strategy out there that you can get into. Like, I mean, it just keeps going, right? There's different things that you can get into creatively. It's just paying attention, actively listening, even listening to what Mark's saying about different ways people have done this. So it's awesome. Christine said, commercial real estate seller financing ?
Yes, 100%. That's why I teach people to start with residential, because once you understand residential, you can get into commercial world 100%. About 2 years ago when the market was hot, I did one. And actually, I'm doing a land development project, 145 doors outside of Charlotte that we're doing. So what we did on one was the seller was trying to sell his land straight up. Actually, I've done several of these. Even during COVID, I did a couple of these in my own backyard. Um, so the seller was selling the property straight up. And what I said to him, if you want to stay in the deal, because he had no mortgage, you want to stay in the deal, I can show you, because we subdivided up into 41 lots. He was gonna make an extra like $6,000 per lot or something. I think it came out to like $1.7 million more that he was going to make versus selling it, because he was going to get paid on a per lot basis every time a lot was sold, if that makes sense. Does that
Interesting.
make sense?
Yeah, I mean, it's again, the strategy sounds like just a way better for the seller. I mean, obviously you're going to get a great deal from it too, but it just sounds like a no-brainer to go off this schedule versus just a regular transaction.
So listen, it goes back again, listen to the seller. How can you help them? Are they into it just to run and get the money and get out? Or are they into it to make more money in the long run? So you got to listen to those things. And if you can present in a way where joint venture with a seller, instead of like another, you go out there and try to raise capital and do all this stuff, you have the seller already in place. And if it's free and clear, you can use the land as the leverage of whatever you're trying to accomplish.
Cool. I mean, right there, golden nuggets, golden value, Mark. I love it. Another thing that, we always talk about the positives in these deals, and we always want to keep it on, like, we're positively coming out of these transactions. But once in a while, you never know on a deal where if you got to take your losses or cut your losses, right? And you were telling me about one deal where you lost $47,000 on one deal. What in the world happened there?
It was not a non-landlord friendly state. That's kind of what happened on that one. And that goes back to when we were talking about, doing a lease option versus an agreement for deeds in some of those states. So I did a lease option in Massachusetts to an end buyer. And in my lease options in most states, I set it up where they're taking care of the maintenance and repairs, like something simple. Well, what happened was, for some reason in Mass, when you do a background check on evictions, they don't show up in Mass. I didn't know this. And these people were evicted several times before that. And it came back 0 on the report. So what happened was, the pipes froze and the pipes burst, and they were supposed to have insurance. They didn't get the insurance. The insurance they gave us collapsed, and then they were supposed to take care of the property maintenance and repairs. I could have given them $10,000 to walk and go away. They were open to it, but the attorney up there in Mass said, "Oh, we can go after them." Blah blah blah. And what happened was that the court system looked at the agreement as landlord-tenant law versus a purchase and sale agreement, because we had a purchase and sale agreement. So that's what I'm saying is, when you're in some of these non-landlord friendly states, be very careful doing a lease option. I'd rather do now an agreement for deed. So yes, you are gonna majority, you want to make sure you win, but like be very careful in some of the states that are non-landlord friendly if you're doing a lease option. So that's kind of what happened with that one. So that was a good learning experience, so you live and learn.
That's a huge takeaway. You definitely have to do your due diligence on the market that you're going into, and whether that strategy that you want to implement is going to have a positive reaction, or it's something that's just not favorable over there. And a lot of these non-friendly landlord states are really hard to work with. There's so many people right now that don't even want to invest in those states. Like, saw something in Chicago. There was something else in, like, I don't know if it was Rhode Island or Massachusetts, and then California. And then I hear it's like, it takes like a year to evict somebody in Canada. It's like a lot of these places that outside of these, Canada's, outside of US, but still, point is, like, you really have to know your markets. Like, if you're going to invest somewhere, you have to do your due diligence. And Florida is fantastic. I mean, everybody loves Florida.
Yeah. And just make sure, like, if you're getting into this, that if you don't, you always want to make sure that you have enough capital to carry a property for 6 months to pay the seller, the mortgage, or whatever you structure it, if you're not collecting the capital coming from your buyer. 6 to 8 months. You do get a large down payment. That's what I shoot for. And I put it in escrow and let it sit there. Don't spend it. Because if you ever have a problem that goes bad, you need that reserve to go into it. So you just want to be like, again, risk factor. One of the things I do want to bring up a little bit, and I don't want to go negative, and since the market has shifted so much in the last like 4 months, you see a lot of wholesalers jumping over. And I don't know if you see this, Al. Wholesalers are jumping in, structuring the sub-2 deals or seller financing deals and just signing them off as doing an assignment fee to the end buyer. You as the wholesaler are considered a originator. These guys are out there just looking for the assignment fee, but you need to make sure that person is qualifying, because you are out now acting as a loan originator, and it's opening up so many regulations for the consumer protection. You're better off of selling that property to an investor, because then you're exempt. Because if you're putting somebody into that property as owning that property, if you're structuring it, you're finding a property from a seller financing, and then you're putting it in there as they're going to live into a primary residence. There's so many regulations to protect that consumer from predatory lenders. You don't want to be seen as a predatory lender of structuring a deal using a seller financing and taking your $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 assignment fee. In some cases, that could be almost looked at as an APR. And then it's usually all. So I just want you to kind of I see a lot of that happening right now. So just be very cautious. If you're selling the property, definitely go out there and do it, but sell it to an investor. Be very, very, very careful if you're selling it to an end person that's going to living into it as a primary resident. And if you do, you have to make sure they're qualified. Otherwise, there's so many different, you have the SAFE Act, you have the Dodd-Frank Act, you have the RESPA. There's so many different regulations that a lot of these people have no clue about.
It's really interesting. It's probably the second time I've heard this in the last week.
Because it's happening and they don't know. They don't know what they don't know. So us experienced investors seeing how reckless they are, and I shouldn't say reckless, they just don't know. And they're doing stuff out there. If that end buyer stops paying and you set that up, you as the wholesaler are responsible to make the payments for that property under one regulation, Dodd-Frank, not counting the state stuff. So they just don't know. And that's why I'm out there. And there's a lot of us with experience are trying to educate people. Like, it's amazing what you're doing. Do it right. But be very careful of putting your end consumer in there and you have to make sure they qualify, because you could be considered a predatory lender. If you're just looking for that assignment fee and not knowing that they can qualify and just be out of it and I'm done. If they stop paying, you're getting pulled into that mess. So, but if you sell it to an investor, you're exempt. So I just, a lot of us have been talking about it because we see it happening out there, and we're all been in these Zoom calls and talking about it, because they're going to destroy the industry. Sub-2 and some of the seller finance are going to become illegal if these people don't understand what they're doing. And it's a matter of time before the regulators are going to start coming down. And before, in 2008, I seen people go to jail over this stuff. But the market's been so hot for the last 10 years, everybody's been focused on the wholesale, buying it at sub-2 and sell. Buying it, not getting into, like, when you're getting in creative and you're doing notes and APRs and rates and stuff, and you're doing it to the end buyer, the end consumer, there's so many regulations that open up where people don't even know about it.
Yeah, isn't there some I heard about this, I don't know this myself, but isn't there some kind of thing where it's like if it happens 3 times, it becomes like really serious?
There's so many things. I mean, some states it can be considered a felony, and you can go to jail for this stuff. But people don't know. They're learning from some of these gurus that know just a little bit more than them, right? But they're not teaching them. They're taking the sub-2 model that everybody's been learning, or seller financing model, right? They've been learning, but taking their wholesale experience and assigning it and being out of it. And they don't understand that they're the ones structuring this. The seller doesn't know. The buyer doesn't know. You're the one structuring this, putting this, and you can be seen as a loan originator, and then your assignment fee with a down payment on top of it can be considered as an APR, and then there's usury laws on top of it. So again, I keep saying, if you don't know the laws, make sure you're selling it to another investor to protect yourself. That's all the bottom line.
Yeah.
So I
Huge.
apologize going on and on about this, but we just see this happening, and just these people just don't know. They've been in real estate for the last 3-5 years doing wholesaling, and it's been great, but they don't know about the finance world.
No, I love it when we have this kind of episode that we're kind of winding down to the end, and we have like this big wait a second, make sure you know about this before you keep going into these deals, right?
Yeah.
Like it's sub 2, creative financing, seller terms. It all sounds great, but if you don't know the rules and you don't know and the laws, and at least getting with the right professionals that understand this stuff, you could be going down a crazy dangerous road, right?
No, but yeah, it's I love seller financing. There's so many opportunities. Just educate yourself on it. That's really what it comes down to. And just follow different people, and then just pick up the phone and call your local real estate attorney in your state, and just understand, because every state's got different regulations besides the federal, every state. But you can do really well. It's great because you can help a seller, you can help a buyer, you can make money in between. Just make sure that you know what you're getting into with the regulations. That's all it is.
Yeah. Fantastic. Srijana said you have educated about this on your page again and again. I hope people are serious about learning those regulations. We'll make sure you can find Mark's content. Mike will keep putting it up where you can find Mark, because I know you probably still do the videos in your Facebook group, right?
I do.
And you talk about all this stuff. You get into it. You dive deep. I mean, this is valuable info if you want to get in this space. I mean, you want to learn it from people like Mark. You want to learn it from people that are getting into this niche and are doing this every single day. They're speaking the language of creative financing, which is huge. So, Mark, as we wrap it up, I wanted to save the best for last because everybody's watching. The hot topic trend. This is definitely a new thing now, Mike. The hot topic trend, which is market by market. Some markets are pulling back, but some markets have pulled back a lot in the last 2 months. Like Florida's hot. Like, what's going on with some of the market pullbacks?
Like I had one that came in last week. Actually, what's today? Actually, yeah, last Thursday. This person purchased a property for in Georgia, $165,000 a year ago. And we were running the comps. It's worth 110 today, 110, 115 on the high end. So, I mean, come on. We went up 40% in 2 years. I mean, the feds, this is what the feds want. They want to, and they shot them with this whole bank failure that happened this week. And they can't raise the rates anymore because it's putting a stress in the banking system now. So what do they want to do? Do they, the inflation, like if you look at go to Walmart, Home Depot, those inflation things, they've come down. The only thing that has not come down is really real estate. And they need the real estate to come down because it's unaffordable for people can't live anymore. So we went up 40% in 2 years. So they need to pull that down to make it affordable because the salaries didn't go up to that. So this is what the Fed's been trying to do to they're not going to come out and say it because they don't want everybody running out there and selling the properties. But now with the bank failures, they can't really keep increasing the rates anymore. So it's going to help us. The real estate market is going to kind of start heating back up a little bit more in the next probably 30 to 60 days. So because of it. But yes, it's market by market. And I think a lot of it also has to do with the political environment. I mean, look at Florida. That's why Florida is still hot because of the political environment. Texas, look at the areas where the political environment is not the best. And that's why everybody's leaving those states.
Interesting. So did the bank failure kind of signal to you that was the key that, real estate's going to heat up again? Was it that moment that you saw in the last week that you were like,
it was when our leader, the president, came out Monday morning and said that we're going to protect these banks from failing. And then what caused a lot of the failure is the Fed itself, because they wanted these banks to buy these bonds. So, and that's kind of what put a lot of pressure on it. And it's bad management. But now they need the banking system to be stronger than inflation. So they printed all this money and they created this problem. And now they're trying to find that balancing act. So they're trying to hike rates, but doing so, they put a lot of pressure on the banking system of the smaller banks that they're not capitalized. Like the big boys, they got so much cash, but some of these other banks, so they got to be really, really careful on that. how they handle that. So it's the balancing act. The Feds are a little bit too behind the ball of increasing the rates, and they did it. I mean, what we want 450 basis points in like a year's time? That's crazy. Unheard of.
That's crazy. I mean, again, I think a lot of these recent things that have been popping up are interesting indicators for a lot of people that have been doing this for many years, like you have, right? Like you're kind of seeing the patterns, the ebb and the flow, and then wait a second, is this the next, takeoff of the real estate market?
Well,
So
I wanted the market to pull back a little bit more. I wanted a good year's run on it, like because that's great opportunities, especially in the creative world. The sellers, they can't sell. If they can't sell, that's where we come in and we kind of solve the problem for them and make some money along the way.
I love it. I love it, Mark. Mark, you dropped so many golden nuggets on the show tonight, so much gems. It was amazing. I know a lot of people took so much from the episode. As I do on my show, we'll make sure we put up all your info and everything on how they can contact you. But as I do at the end of my show, I do a final words, final thoughts segment on anything you talked about with seller terms, financing, where the market's going, market trends, hot markets. Your choice. You pick it wherever you want to go. But as we wrap this up, final words, final thoughts, Mark Monroe.
That's great. I would say, just believing in yourself as a person. And if you struggle, find people to kind of gravitate to help lift you to the other people, to lift you to a level. If you have people in your life that are pulling you down, kind of get rid of the bad energy and just surround yourself with great positive people and pull yourself. That's the beauty of the real estate networking world, is because everybody lifts each other up. I mean, look at the energy that Al gives off. That's why everybody's listening to this show. So we're all lifting to each other up. If you feel like you're struggling and you're getting pulled back, start start listening and doing some audiobooks and educating yourself on your mind and getting yourself around surrounded people. Because if you're surrounding yourself with people that are succeeding, you're just going to get pulled into it no matter what. That's kind of where I'm kind of leading towards.
Fantastic advice, right? Surround yourself around the people that are going to help elevate everybody together, right? Being around that sphere of influence that is positive and that leads a trajectory up, right? I think that's fantastic advice. Be surrounded by that. And the real estate community, a lot of it is like that. And that's what makes it great, right? That's what makes our communities grow and makes it fantastic. So
It is. And get out there. If you're shy, just go and sit in a corner. Like, remember the high school dance, and you sit in that corner. Just get out there and just kind of sit in the corner and just observe. And then eventually you'll feel more comfortable in going into it. So everybody's shy at first. Even myself, I was shy at first. Like, oh, I feel a little awkward. I feel outside my element. If you're not going outside your element, you're not moving forward.
Love it, Mark. Mark, you're the man. Thank you for coming on live on the show, answering questions, going through comments, talking about things that we wanted to get through, things we didn't even expect to get through. Thank you. Thank you for coming on and sharing.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me on, man. You're always great.
And I'll see you soon at a conference. I don't know when that's going to be, but when they're happening, I'll see you there. And
absolutely,
it'll be a blast.
And people listening, make sure you guys are at the conference and come up and say hi to both of us.
I love it. Great advice right there. Mark, I'll see you soon, man.
Al, thank you so much.
All right, take care. If you missed any of that episode, I don't care what part you may have missed. If you got off and you come back later, you got to go back to those parts. Watch the full episode. So much to unpack from Mark's episode. I mean, there's from seller financing, seller terms, how to present an offer, talking about where the market's going, positive deals, negative deals, what to look for in your market, what states to stay out of, what states that you need to really do your due diligence on. I mean, I could go over so much on the recap. You don't want to miss it. You want to follow Mark. I know so many people are watching right now. Just so you know, we've been doing the QR code for all of our guests. If you want to connect with any of them, just scan the QR code. And then it'll pull up. I think it'll pull up to a nice screen. I didn't see what this one did, so I have no idea. It'll pull up. But make sure you scan the QR code. We want you to connect with the guests, like Mark was talking about. It's all about networking, connecting with each other, vibing with each other. Because in our world, it's about partnering, not competition. So you want to connect with everybody that you can. And Mark's one that you definitely want to connect with when it comes to seller terms, seller financing, and the creative strategies in real estate. It's another wrap of the show tonight. Oh, that's right. Mike said Linktree. It's going to pop up Linktree. It's another show tonight. Thank you all for watching. I love it. I saw even at the end, Rosanna. Thank you, Mark. Great information as usual. Great night, everyone. I love it. Mark's book is #1 on Amazon. Wow, look at that. #1 on Amazon. I love Teresa. Thank you always for watching. What I love, Teresa, is what's so cool about having guests like you on the show. We get to see like a still frame photo and then like a recap from a guest. Like that is so cool. Like I don't know who's doing that, but I love when you do that. So I always appreciate you watching as always. I hope you got a lot of info and create that world out there when you can be virtual and live and you can work wherever you want. I love it. My guy, Robert Rodriguez, Trijana, thank you for being on. Christine, of course, always dropping so many great questions. Eugene, Noah, thank you all for being on, dropping value, dropping great questions. That's what we love. We love the participation on the show. We want more of that. Give me more of that. We want to have you ask your questions. We want to give you the value. We want you to take so much away from this. So we're all growing together. That final advice from Mark right there, which is huge. We're all growing together. Thank you all so much. Another night on the Al Nicoletti Show. We will be live next Wednesday, 9 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss it. Set your alarms. And if you want more content like this, make sure you check out the Al Nicoletti YouTube channel, the Facebook page, the business page, the Instagram @Attorney Nicoletti. And you can find all the episodes on Spotify, iTunes, and Google Play. I'll see you all next Wednesday night, 9 p.m. Eastern. Take care. Have a great night.